All right, and now we're going to move on to the brand new Nordic Weasel Games title,
Yeah, the historical stuff.
which I keep trying to pluralize one or the other, or both
Yes.
sometimes, but it is Musket 2 Rifle.
Yes. And actually, there was an old game that was called something like From Muskets to Rifles. So it being singular
Oh,
is actually important.
okay, perfect. So an elevator pitch for this one.
Yes. It is large is skirmish in the 19th century. And by largest, I mean like 30, 40 guys. Basically, buy a box of 172 scale like plastics or a box of Perry Napoleonics or something, and have a skirmish action. Um, you know, patrols, foragers, stuff like that. Dudes in brightly colored uniforms shooting at each other.
Nice. So we'll go into the first round of questions, which is game design and philosophy.
Hey,
The rulebook for Musket to Rifle is a workhorse system designed to be easy to understand and familiar to players. What were the most challenging aspects of designing a system that balances historical fidelity with intuitive gameplay?
that is super
It's
AI.
super AI.
um, but it is a good question because there are some things. Whenever you do historical stuff, you kind of have to like pick and choose a little bit. You can pick your things that you want to emphasize, but there's also the things you're gonna have to like let go. So like the obvious one is that if when you read an account of like a company of troops skirmishing and trading shots with some enemies, they would be there for like 3 hours trading shots with each other. Because skirmishing, it turns out that with a black powder rifle or black powder musket, shooting at some dudes like way over there behind some bushes is not real accurate. So, and obviously you can't really like have a gameplay out that way. You have to be a little more decisive. You have to kind of tune it up a bit. So we're kind of like we're skipping that part and going to the part where like they're getting a little too close and it's getting a little too hot. What you can do on the other hand, so this is where you pull out something to emphasize. What was really important was that it was a true skirmish, that the game, the units in the game would play out like they were men who had been sent out to skirmish, which for the non historical nerds means sending troops out, kind of typically you're going like in pairs or you're like out in a chain with like a couple of paces between each man, and they're kind of like loading and firing individually at individual targets. You're not shooting in ranks or anything like that. Skirmishers might be sent out to screen the main army, to contest some objective, to snipe at the enemy. And of course, if you send out your skirmishers, the other guys are going to send out theirs, and then they spend some time shooting at each other before the battle gets on. So it was important that it felt like that's actually what is happening. Because I played a lot of so-called skirmish games where you're like 12 dudes are still trying to like line up in ranks or form squares, which is bananas. It's not a thing. That doesn't happen. So here, there's none of that. Like everything is legitimately. If you see 12 guys on the table in like a unit, that's 12 guys with muskets. They're not standing in for a company of guys. They're not standing in for anything. It's 12 guys. If they are strung out along a hedgerow, then that means your dudes are strung out along that hedgerow. So it's meant to be very sort of specific in that sense. That also meant that some things, like there's no rules for artillery because you don't really shoot artillery at like a skirmish line. Like a cannonball is just going to fly past them. Um,
Mhm.
so again, it's meant to be like a real skirmish game.
The most legit of skirmish games.
The most skirmishes.
All right. So the next question will be you describe the game as Big Skirmish, typically
Uh-huh.
involving 4 to 5 units of 10 figures each. Can you explain why you chose this scale over larger engagements or smaller skirmishes? How does this size impact the game's tactical feel?
Well, the reason for that is very simple. If you buy a box of like hat miniatures, like 172 scale figures, you probably get like 45 or 50 guys. So when we tested the very original version of it, we had bought 2 boxes of Napoleonic dudes, and we
Mm-hmm.
picked out a couple of guys who were officers, and the rest of them were divided up into 4 squads each, and then we shot at each other. That's how the game started, and that's why that's the intended size. Um, and from there, a lot of things then happen. Like if you have that many dudes, you don't necessarily want like each guy individually to do too much. You don't want to have so like some dudes are moving and some are standing and shooting. You want to have like unit orders. Um, you don't want to track like which guys have to reload and stuff. You just want to have that like abstracted into combat. So instead of like tracking reloading, for example, you just have a penalty for moving and firing that depends on the weapon. So troops with like breech loading rifles can move and fire better than troops with muzzle loaders because they take longer to reload.
Hmm.
So once you know like how many guys you're going to have, that like answers a lot of questions for you about what the game is, the mechanics are going to look like. So
Okay. Then we'll move on to the next question. The game covers a wide historical period from the Wars of the Spanish Succession to the late 1800s. How did you ensure that the core rules remain consistent while accurately representing the significant changes in weaponry, tactics, and technology over more than a century of warfare?
yeah, that's one of those questions like super nerds will
Yeah,
ask.
yeah.
And to an extent, you kind of just have to like say that it does. But the basic idea of um, infantry skirmishing and hasn't really changed very much throughout the period. As you get to the end of the period, you start getting like rifles showing up, like more and more combat is skirmishing because you're just going to get shot to pieces. But the basic idea of sending out like a scattered detachment of men who are going to go out and like pick shots and snipe at enemy sentries and stuff, that really doesn't read very different if you read them like somebody's diary from the Napoleonic Wars versus a diary from like the Franco-Prussian War. Like the basic ideas of that are the same. So a lot of it can be handled with things like the weapons as you progress through, and you can almost do this thing where you like pick a war at the beginning of the period and then you like move up. So like when you get like percussion caps instead of matchlocks or flintlocks, then like some of the random events that cause like bad weather will not affect you as much. So you have like little edge.
Hmm.
When rifles start showing up, you get more range. When breech loaders show up, you get more shots and less penalties for moving and stuff. So some of it can be a little gear specific because changes in weapons are such a huge deal in this period.
Hmm.
Skis has a little question if you want to throw that one in.
Yeah. So I'll read it out loud. Does the game support all cavalry engagements? From my very limited 19th century warfare knowledge, a lot of skirmish engagements happened between opposing light cavalry detachments.
Yes. So there are, I think, four cavalry types in there. Um, and yes, we didn't originally. There were going to be like army building rules, but somebody pointed out like, why don't you just let people figure that out themselves? So you can like, as far as like building an army out of points, you just pick whatever you want. If you technically want an army made entirely of like sergeants, you can probably just do that, but it would be stupid. But yes, you can build an all cavalry army, and you can have cavalry dismount to then fight on foot, like dragoon style. Um, and there are options for taking heavy cavalry. They tend to kind of get shot to bits if they're just on their lonesome, but that's fine. But yeah, light cavalry, like American Civil War style, like skirmishing each other, you can totally do that. You can have dragoons that are like dismounting to fight with carbines and stuff. So yeah, cavalry is definitely covered.
Sweet. Then, the final question in the game design and philosophy section is the rulebook mentions two approaches to historical wargaming, realistic and dramatic. Can you elaborate on how a player might use the provided rules to lean into one style versus the other, perhaps with an example from a specific conflict, like the American Civil War or the Napoleonic Wars?
Hey, see, it's so educational.
Mm-hmm.
So accurate is that you are trying to be some degree of simulation. So the example I give in the book is like if you have a book, like I have a book about like heroic actions in the Napoleonic Wars. So you might pick out one of those and say, okay, I know the exact regiment that was fighting here, and I know where they fought. I can look up like what that looks like. Maybe I even have a map. You try to like build something looking like that. Like you're trying to be like specific. Um, to like what actually happened at a certain time or like very specific to what like your action might be one that didn't really happen, but that could have happened. You're trying to say, okay, it's the Prussians versus the French, and you want to have a infantry skirmish like while they're both like contesting a bridge somewhere, and you're setting up like a pretty realistic setup, which is probably like the same kind of infantry on both sides, right? Like
Hmm.
because they're from the same unit. The dramatic approach is basically it can still be realistic, but it tends to be a little more aimed at like being colorful. So if I'm building a more dramatic army of like French, Franco-Prussian war soldiers, maybe I want to have a squad of like French Marines, just because I painted some and they look different, look cool. Like, would there be one squad of Marines with like a bunch of regular army guys? Like, no, like they would be in their own unit. But in a dramatic game, it's as important to like it's driven by like your toy soldiers. You paint as some new
Hmm.
guys, you want to use those. So it's a little more. Sometimes like your army can be like a microcosm of the actual army. So maybe you have like if you have like two squads or two units of cavalry as like a Russian player, maybe you take like one unit of Cossacks and one unit of like something else because a large army would have both. So your little tabletop army is like shrunk down. So instead of having like three regiments of regular cavalry, three regiments of Cossacks, your little tabletop army just has one squad of each. Boop.
Okay,
So it's like a bathtub army, right?
nice. So it's just the my dude situation for the dramatic effect.
Yeah. Like you're just being more, yeah. It's like it's my shelf, right?
Yeah. This is what I grabbed. This is what I'm playing with.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so the next we'll go into mechanics and gameplay. A notable feature is that a unit doesn't test morale for losing just one figure,
Mhm.
as some steady attrition is expected. This
Yes.
goes against some other wargames. Could you elaborate on the historical research or design philosophy that led to this decision?
Yeah. Well, so the original idea is actually from KPS because I just
Oh,
like the effect that you can lose a guy and now in that game it was because you were supposed to be like medieval troops and they were supposed to be like hard men. Like they
mhm.
probably like had three of their kids die of the plague that morning. So seeing one of their friends like get an arrow in the balls, that's not like that big a deal.
No. Yeah.
But it also kind of worked. Here's the thing probably if a squad of skirmishers had like one guy shot, they would be like discomfited like a bit because like a dude just got shot.
Mhm.
But when you read like accounts of firefights with skirmishers, they're in the line for like a long time, and they'll kind of have like wounded men like drift back to the main unit, or like a guy like helps somebody and then comes back, or
Mhm.
one guy gets wounded, like seven of them go to the rear because it's you find a reason, right?
Yeah.
But they would kind of stay in the line for like a long time. Skirmishes would only usually break if like they get hit really hard, or like you get outflanked and shot to bits, or if somebody like makes a point of coming over there with like swords and bayonets, and then suddenly
Mm.
it's business time. So it's it's a case where like the rules specifically may or may not be realistic, but the vibe that it produces is realistic. It basically means that if you're just taking like one loss like each time you activate, you're basically like still going to be in line. Like they might be worried for a moment, but they kind of like pull back together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of designing for effect, I think the actual pros call it.
I do like the thought of someone shooting at each other for 3 hours and then they're like, okay, you know what? We're done with this. Let's just go over
Yeah,
there and
yeah.
chop them. It's
Yeah. At
chopping
some point,
time.
like somebody either gets sent in or like some cavalry shows up to like wreck everyone's shit and you just
Oh
run
yeah.
away. So you can find all kinds of like generals, letters, and memoirs being like frustrated because like the skirmishes aren't achieving anything. Actually, a true historical fact: skirmishing was actually something that you would often volunteer for because it
Mm.
was relatively safe and you got to like do your part. So you can stand out there in the bushes and burn off your ammunition, then you can head back to the supply column, as opposed to the guys who has to go in and like get shot at with cannon and stuff.
Ooh, yeah. Work
So
smarter, not harder. Yeah.
exactly.
All right. So the next question will be: the book includes an optional lull in fighting mechanic triggered by
Mhm.
a time track. What role
Yes.
does this play in the game, and why did you decide to make it a central rather than optional rule?
So it actually comes from an old game called 1916. It may still be. It was like a free game. It might still be out there. I'm not sure, but it had this mechanic where like there would be a break in the game, and I always just thought it was really cool. You got to like regroup a little bit, bring a couple of troop stands back.
Hmm.
But it was also a thing that seems like it often happens when you read about like firefights and battles. There will just be a period where like things chill out a little bit. Everyone is like they kind of burn through the ammunition. They need to like like one guy's out of ammo, so he needs to like get some bullets from another guy. You kind of like get your wounded guys pulled back. You find the dude who's hiding in a ditch and is actually okay, and you sort of like get everything back. And then like at some point somebody like blows the whistle and you throw everyone back into it. So I wanted to have that effect. It also makes for a useful like a midpoint. Like you can set up the game. So the standard is that if you're not playing a specific number of turns, the game ends the second time a lull occurs. Now, for the scenarios, it's usually just a set number of turns because with scenarios, you probably want to have it a little more tight. But it does allow you, if you're playing kind of open-ended, then yeah, the first lull is like the halfway point. You've been slugging it out for like an hour or whatever. So it's like a timing system. It also, I like the idea that you can get a couple of guys back, and then you can kind of throw yourself back into it. So maybe now you have enough guys you want to like try to turn their flank or like run up that hill or something.
Okay, yeah, it's chopping time now. We had our break. Time to chop.
Yeah. Now it's going to get even.
All right. So the last question for the mechanics and gameplay section will be: the standard deployment section provides a detailed process for setting up a battle, including rolling a d10 to modify a force's strategic rating. What does this add to the game compared to a simpler method, like players taking turns placing units?
Yeah, honestly, that bit is a remnant from the fact that the game originally started out as a hack of a Warhammer 40k Second Edition. It doesn't resemble it that much anymore, although now that I say it, people will be able to tell if you kind of squint a little bit. But that game had strategy ratings that determine like who set up in what order. So I just kind of like that idea. I like the idea. Now you do kind of have to set the strategy ratings yourself. Probably in the future there will be some suggested ratings for armies, but you might say like if one side is like the French under Napoleon, they have a higher strategy rating than their opponents. So typically their opponents would have to set up first. But there is a die roll, so it can be modified a little bit. So sometimes the Russians will like pull a trick on them, and they won't have to set up first.
Okay.
So it's kind of just because it was there when we first started testing it, but I also just like the effect of it. But if you don't like it, you could just treat the armies as the same and then roll the dice.
Okay. So we'll move on to the third section of the questions, which is player experience and community. The campaign rules include a personal game element, allowing a player to follow a single character through battles. This is a unique feature for a historical wargame. What inspired you to include this, and how does it enhance the overall experience?
I don't actually know what the inspiration was. I just thought it's something that was cool. It may be subconsciously from the original Squad Leader or something like that, because that had a thing like that. But I've thought for a while that it's cool. It's actually something we used to do way back in the day. We would play like Warhammer Fantasy, and you would pick out one guy in like a regiment or something that was your dude, and then at the end of the game we would see like what happened with your dude. Like, is he still alive? Did he see some crazy shit? Like, did that dude have to fight a dragon or something? It was just a way of like sort of getting like sometimes you get down and you see the battle from your dude and you realize that, man, he doesn't even know there's like a unit of Chaos Knights on the battlefield because you can't see them for shit.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of that. I just thought it was this cool idea that you're playing like this army game, which can sometimes be a little impersonal. So just put you in that like, like maybe you start thinking about what would what would his diary look like? Like he was in a firefight, but his experience might have been completely different from that of the army. If he was out on a hill on the side and sniping at the Germans over there, it may not have been that intense of a battle, even though on the other side, like a bunch of dudes were like slaughtering each other. So it's a
Okay.
way of just getting a different perspective and getting a little bit of a dual perspective. Plus, if you have a guy you're like responsible for, it'll affect like the way the decisions you make. Because suddenly you may be a little more dubious about sending that unit to like sacrifice itself, because that's your dude.
Yeah, yeah. Can't kill off my dude.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, you encourage players to get in touch with errors, suggestions, and feedback. What are some of the most memorable pieces of feedback you've received, and how have they influenced a game's development?
So obviously there's none for this game yet, other than
Yes.
like people help test it. Um, in terms of good advice, a lot of times it's just like people always apologize for this because they'll come up with some like really specific sub case. If this unit is doing this thing while opposed by this in this terrain, and they'll find some like loophole or a thing that doesn't work or something like that. And I know a lot of people don't think that matters, but it does matter to me. Like the rules should account for something like that. Maybe there's an elegant way. Sometimes it's so obscure you just have to let it go.
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, just coming up with those weird cases that you know, because you have so a game is like 10,000 different pieces that all like connect and churn around each other. So being able to like pick out like just some interaction that there was no way to prevent, or it never came up in testing because it just there's only so many things. If you have like a couple of random event tables, this specific combination of events has a 1 in 1,000 chance rate.
Mhm.
uh, as far as like the weirdest, I think I've told this story before, but somebody a long time ago didn't want me to use the word dash for running troops, which I've always
Oh,
done,
yeah.
because it sounded like Daesh, which is like the Islamic like jihadist terrorist group.
Oh, okay.
And like, yeah, like thank you for your feedback, sir. Like you can't. Sometimes you have to, or sometimes you'll get people who like kind of read the game, but they want it to be something else, like that is completely inappropriate for what you were doing, and you
Yeah.
just so let it go. Like
Okay.
in the end, like it doesn't hurt you to like read the feedback and think about it, but you have to sort of sort through it.
What percentage of responses to players' feedback do you think you have simply said you handle blank the usual way?
So I try to specifically never do that. Um, a lot of times, if it's an error, then I just say, okay, we'll fix that like as soon as we can. If it is a suggestion for handling something a different way, the answer will usually be either yes, and I'll implement that. I'll think about that, or I will say, yeah, that's a fine, like alternate way. But you know, the rule will probably stay the way it is. And that's usually like most people who are suggesting like alternate ways or optional rules will that's kind of what they expect.
Yeah.
Um, if somebody is like they're unhappy with the rule, or they're asking like how something works because they don't think it should work like that. This is maybe more for the historical games. A lot of times, what I try to do is like tell them, here's the reason the rule works this way, but you could change it to this, and then that would work differently. And that's 99% of the time, people are totally fine with that.
Okay.
So,
And
but yeah, I try to
players,
give like specific answers to things.
okay, and players' words have a little more weight when they've joined your Patreon, correct? The Nordic Weasel Games
Yes.
Patreon. Hmm.
Yes, each dollar you commit on Patreon is a 1% increase, so I take your queries seriously.
Hmm.
It
So just
starts at 1%, so you might want to juice your odds.
yeah,
It
bump it
does
up.
it does accumulate, but only for 3 months. Then it starts dropping off. So you gotta keep throwing money on the kitty.
Yeah, you should see your ledgers of tracking.
Yeah, it's quite complicated actually.
All right, so the next question will be: the rulebook contains a comprehensive list of rifles by nationality and year, which you mentioned
Yes.
is a work in progress. What kind of information are you hoping the community can provide to help expand this appendix?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There was actually a fan that contributed that, and he went through like this massive work of digging through books and Wikipedia articles stuff of finding like all kinds of rifles throughout the 19th century, some of which you could find names for, but is unclear when an army like adopted them. Some of
Mm,
them you can not necessarily even find out how many the army bought, just that
mm,
they had some at some point. A lot of stuff like that. Some weapons, it's even a little unclear what they necessarily were, because especially when it's not. If it's the more you get into like the fringes of stuff, the more difficult it can be, especially in English. It helps if you read like French or German.
Hmm.
So, but nerds being nerds, this is the sort of thing that
Sorry.
I was jamming a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, there's going to be some dude out there who's like an expert in Italian like muzzle loaders in the 1800s, and they will know that A, that gun was definitely not used then, and B, we're obviously idiots because we left out this specific weapon used by like naval detachments in Sicily or whatever.
yeah.
So honestly, it's the kind of thing that people can just, the list is there for Santa as like, this is what we got, and that's as accurate as we could get it. And then when people who really care about that sort of thing provide better information, it can be narrowed down and like chiseled away to be more accurate.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, the aforementioned Patreon will add much weight to such lists. If you want your
Absolutely.
naval forces to have the right rifles, guys.
Yeah, you might want to. I want to open your wallet a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And the final question for this section and the wrap up for musket to rifle in general will be
Mm-hmm.
for someone new to historical miniatures gaming,
Yeah.
what's one piece of advice you'd give them for getting started with musket to rifle?
Um, the one piece of advice would be pick a period that you are at least curious about and ideally like passionate about. If you don't try to pick something that you think will be easier. Like if you really want to play like American Civil War, then get miniatures and start with that. Don't think that you have to start with Napoleonics because that's the core of most black powder games or something. Or don't think that if you really want to play, like the Boer War, then do that. Don't worry about the fact whether like starting the game with magazine rifles will like unbalance things or something. Just go with the period you're passionate about. That'll carry you the rest of the way.
Okay.
So, and then you might find that, oh, okay, now that we're into the rules, maybe I do want to do some Napoleonics or something. Then you can just get some more dudes and learn how the game changes between like different. But yeah, like do just go for the thing you're passionate about, or the thing you're like you think. If you're brand new to black powder gaming, then maybe you're gonna have to figure out like where you want to start. So if in
Or,
doubt,
um,
Napoleonics is always fine, but
yeah, because that is probably the most accessible, right? Napoleonics. So maybe it's even a factor of what miniatures can I buy
yeah,
locally.
like Napoleonics obviously are super well covered by like the Perry stuff or like 172 scale. You can get
Hmm.
stuff for cheap, or you can get stuff that looks good. That's kind of your two choices. But yeah, like look at like I forget. There's obviously more American Civil War stuff stateside, but there are definitely some UK companies as well.
Hmm.
If you want Franco-Prussian War, maybe that's a little more specific to certain companies. So you can take a look at like what's available. You can also just go look at like companies that do historical miniatures to see like what catches your eye. Like
Hmm.
I've seen more than a few people who got into Napoleonic wargaming because they looked like the AB miniatures, like range of figures,
Oh yeah.
and you just kind of fall in love with those, or like see what catches your eye. Some people want to play like a conflict with their country that they live
Oh
in
yes.
or were born in. We're part of like um like if you had a family member who was like in a regiment in like the Napoleonic Wars, maybe that's if you know your family history. Like it could be anything, literally. But whatever you're interested in and passionate about, that's where you should start.
Okay. Um. Yeah, I guess that's a good wrap up for this. We will have a link to download below.
Yeah,
You have to pay money,
absolutely.
of course. It's going to be on
Yes,
Wargame Vault. And yeah, just click the little link below and you will be directed right to the page where you can give Ivan all your money and you can
absolutely.
enjoy some great musket and rifle fun.
Yes, and like Roll Camera, it will be updated in response to feedback. So especially for things like the scenarios and stuff like that, we're hoping to update those as. And there's always the inevitable like post-release bugs that just slipped everyone's eyeballs.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
so expect a living rule book from here on in, I would say,
yes, absolutely. Hmm.
with many versions to come.
Hopefully.
Yeah.